Gorgies, it's Iman. I'm back today for another true crime video. The following video contains explicit language and strong sexual language, which may be offensive to some viewers and inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only. Alright, so now that we got that out of the way, you guys, I want to talk to you guys about an honor killing case. And this case happened back in 2007 or 2008. The case itself contains the murder of two sisters. These two sisters were found shot dead and left in a taxi cab, both murdered, which left a lot of people speculating that it might have been an honor killing committed by the family. This is going to be a difficult video for me to record, and the reason being is because I identify a lot with this case. Within my own family, we have had our own honor killing occur. However, I do feel like it needs to be stated. This type of mentality and behavior needs to be checked. A lot of people still have this ideology thinking that it's okay. And that's why I feel like it's a very important case to go over here on my channel. You might have heard of it before already, but I want to reiterate here just because there's more points that I would like to make in regards to this case. Not only that, but the prime suspect in this case is on the top 10 FBI's most wanted list, and he is still currently a fugitive. Let's just hop right into it. So before we can figure out what happened to these two poor sisters, we got to take it all the way back and discuss the parents, because usually that's where all the problems start. The parents of Amina and Sara Saeed are Patricia and Yasser Saeed. Patricia's family owned a convenience store in the neighborhood, and she had quickly gotten to know the Saeed family because they were regular customers who frequented there. She was only 14 years old at the time, but she started dating one of the brothers, and the brother's name was Yasin. She dated him for a while, and then when that relationship fizzled out, she began to date Yasser, which is the eldest child of 5. Then came Yusri, Yasin came right after, then came Mohsen, and then there was their sister Geda. As Yasir and Patricia began to talk, he filled her head up with all of these promises. He spoke to her family, her father and mother, convinced them that he had a lot of property back home in Egypt, that he would be a good caretaker of Patricia, who at the time was only 14 or 15 years old. In later interviews, Patricia then stated that she only really married Yasser because she wanted to get out of her family's household. They were really poor, they didn't really have that much money. According to her statement, she wanted to just get out of the house. So she married Yasser, who was 30 years old at the time, so pretty much double her age. Soon after they got married in 1987, they applied for Yasser's green card because he was only in the States on a student visa. The marriage started off good. He was loving. He showed affection in the beginning, up until about 7 months to a year into the marriage, and that's when things started going downhill. Yasser wanted more control over Patricia, so he started to slowly isolate her away from her family. His main concern with them was the fact that they were American. Yasser was a Muslim, and he wanted to marry Patricia and in turn also convert her into Islam as well. Some of his controlling behavior included him coming home after work, kicking Patricia's feet as she's laying on the bed, telling her to get up, then exerting his power and control over her by removing items out of drawers, throwing them on the ground, and requiring Patricia to get up and pick them up off of the ground and clean everything up. He also showed abusive sexual behavior towards her. If she had refused to have any sexual relations with him, he would then get very upset, very angry, where at one point he did cut her with a knife on her leg because she refused. With that being said, she then found herself pregnant with her first child, Islam, a year into the marriage. So she had Islam at the age of 16. Soon after that, a year later, she had Amina at the age of 17. Amina was born on March 2nd, 1989. And then came Sara, who she had at the age of 18, born March 16th, 1990. However, Yasser was a pathological liar. He was a cheater. Patricia stated that Yasser had at least 6 affairs that she knew of within their marriage. It's also good to note that Yasser also had another daughter by a different woman the same year that he was married to Patricia. Another key thing to note about Yasser was the fact that he was a very violent individual. When he first came to America back in 1983, he had a job and he had a disagreement with one of the co-workers at this particular job. And Yasser found it completely okay to park the car in front of the establishment, wait for the man to come out, running over him 3 times, ultimately killing him. However, Yasser's father paid off several different people, including lawyers, to get Yasser out of this charge. Now, Amina was a very sweet, a very girly girl kind of child. She was very charismatic. She was easily well-liked, very soft-spoken, and so was her sister Sarah, who was more of a tomboy than she was, but at the same time, they were both very well-mannered. They were both very responsible. They had maintained a high GPA level in all of their classes in school, and overall, they just did really well. They were active. Amina and Sarah, they both did Taekwondo. They were just overall really well-rounded girls. However, it didn't take long for things to go bad at home, which is when Patricia's mother had babysat both Amina and Sarah around 7 and 8 years old. At this time, when she was watching the kids, Amina, the eldest child, had disclosed to her grandmother that her father had been touching on her, had been sexually abusing her. Patricia took the girls to Cook's Children's Hospital to get them examined, which led to a call to CPS. Both girls were claiming to be abused, but Islam stated he had never been touched by his father. When they were examined, there was no evidence that could be collected, but it didn't refute the girls' statements. Police had questioned Yasser. He had gotten upset afterwards. At that time, he then called every 30 minutes and drove by the family's home spewing threats in retaliation of them calling CPS on him. He was arrested because of the complaint of retaliation, but went to jail for unpaid tickets instead, since he hadn't actually done anything he could be charged for in regards to retaliation. He then pressured Patricia and the girls to state it was a false accusation of sexual assault to keep him out of jail. He then manipulated the girls to state that they were told by their grandmother to make these false statements against their father. Amina wrote her aunt a letter stating that her mother wanted her to say she was lying, but she expressed how she didn't want to go back with her parents. The aunt hid the letter in a closet, but she suspects that Amina told her mother she wrote the letter and it was then stolen by Patricia to protect Yasser. And you will see this a lot throughout this whole case. There's a lot of Patricia covering up for Yasser. She changes her statements constantly throughout the whole interview. I've seen her statements flip-flop back and forth from one interview to the next. Patricia then came to Yasser's defense, claiming that she doesn't think that he would ever abuse his children. Patricia also made these statements out of fear of Yasser going back for retaliation against her parents for making these accusations come to light. Now, later on in life, Amina then meets her boyfriend at Taekwondo class. They had a very sacred relationship. It was almost her safe haven amongst everything that's going to unfold in this case. And she grew really close to his mother as well. They were emailing during several different times and moments that were hard on Amina throughout her life. So Amina ended up having a really great relationship with Joseph's mother, the kind of relationship that she's always longed for with her own mother. However, Patricia throughout her life never really sided with Amina nor Sarah. She was quite abused herself. It was almost like Stockholm Syndrome, where she was protecting her own abuser, and it just made it a very tumultuous relationship with her own 2 daughters. Made it hard for them to trust her, because every time they would disclose or open up to Patricia, Patricia then would take the information and run it right back to Yasser. So it made it very difficult for the 2 girls to have a relationship with their mother. So when Amina retold the story to Joseph's mother via email as she was stuck in Egypt because her father had dragged her back home, she also stated how her mother had made her recant her story 10 years ago. When they actually reported the abuse, remember that they were 7 to 8 years old. When she was dating Joseph, this was already later on in life. This was when she was already a teenager. She was about 17 years old. So for her to retell the story of 10 years past, that just leads me to believe that this alleged sexual assault actually took place, because a child isn't going to make up all of these things. The way that they answered the CPS's questions leads you to believe that something really did happen to them just because of the wording. The girls, you can tell in their statements that they didn't even know what any of the body parts were called. They were using terms that were within their age range. Now, one night, Patricia had her younger sister come over to the house to help her out with the kids. However, after this one time that she stayed the night, after returning to her parents' home, she told them that Yasser also sexually assaulted her and that she never wanted to go back over there. All of this was made known to Patricia instantly after the incident occurred. However, Patricia stayed in denial. She didn't want to believe that Yasser would ever do such a thing, and she was always coming to Yasser's defense. Now, according to the grandmother, when Amina was 16, she was taken to Egypt, where Yasser had planned to marry her off to a 40-something-year-old man, but Amina refused. He was going to marry them off to the highest bidder in Egypt. Patricia still states to this day that he was never going to marry them off to Egyptian men, still protecting Yasser. Amina had plans to elope with Joseph, however, her boyfriend in Vegas. His mother was supportive and just wanted to help Amina get away from her abusive father. Amina was so paranoid of her father following and stalking them because he had previously stalked the girls at their place of work, getting mad at Sarah for smiling at the customers. He would record them unknowingly as they were playing, getting mad when they would see him recording them without their consent. And there's several different home videos that Yasser had created throughout their lives that just documented how sick this man was. The way that he would watch his two daughters, it was almost in a narcissistic kind of way where he was so in love with them because they reminded him of himself. It was very clear by the tapes that Yasser only seen these two girls as an extension of himself. He's seen them as possessions. He's seen them as something that he was entitled to and that he can treat in any kind of way and disregard their feelings. To him, they weren't human beings. They weren't two individual girls. They were his daughters, and emphasis on his. However, everything came to a screeching halt when Yasser then found a love note that Amina was writing to Joseph, because this was something that they would commonly do with each other. When Amina and Joseph would see each other during Taekwondo class, they would regularly, on a daily basis, write each other notes during school and then pass them off to each other during the class. Now, when Yasser found one of these notes, that's when everything went to hell. So he lost his freaking mind. He started beating on Amina. He punched her in her face. He kicked her in her face with his boots. He was kicking her in her stomach. He was demanding and threatening her to give him the information as to who she was writing this letter for. He wanted his name. He wanted his address. He wanted to go hunt down this boy so he can go kill him. And this is what Amina was allegedly stating to Joseph's mother. She was letting her know that she wasn't ever going to give any of her son's information to her father. She wanted to give Joseph's mother, Ruth, a heads up about what was going on, letting her know how dangerous her father really is, that he had connections with people underground, he had connections with people in high places, and he can get rid of anybody or come for anybody that gets in his way. When he was beating Amina, she had braces at the time, and when he was kicking her in the face, her lips were so messed up that they were embedded within her braces. So she couldn't even move or talk. That's how messed up her dad beat her that day. So she was unrecognizable. When her mother then was on her way to take her to the hospital to get her checked out and examined, Yasser then convinces Yassine, who was the one brother that he was primarily closest to to call Patricia and tell her to not take Amina to the hospital, because if so, that could have been enough probable cause and have evidence for police to arrest him for abuse. And what did Patricia do? Patricia brought her home. Now, straight after this incident, he relocated the entire family from Irvine, Texas to Louisville, Texas. And when this happened, Amina had no contact with Joseph. She had no contact with anybody. The only time that she ever got to be on the computer and the laptop, she took that time to email her Taekwondo instructor because she was no longer going. She emailed her instructor and begged him to give Joseph, her boyfriend, a message, and that was to contact her at such email and to let him know that she still loved him and nothing ever changed. However, later on in interviews, Patricia is still denying the fact that Yasser and Amina were never fighting that day, that he never hit her or abused her, and she never almost took her to the hospital. She knows nothing of the incident. She also claimed that Yasser is only abusive towards her and not the kids. So after this incident, Amina then started losing hope. She started to become more suicidal, to the point where they took her to counseling. And Amina was so scared to talk to any of the counselors because at that time she was still a minor, and anything that she discussed with the therapist or counselor would be reported directly back to her parents. And if you can imagine, with a mother who is non-protective of her children, that would throw her daughters under the bus like that to protect her own husband, who is also abusing her, and then the father himself, who is the abuser, why she would be so scared to even divulge anything to the counselor. So she didn't really get any help at the end of the day. Now, eventually, Amina and Sarah, they both started to grow tired of their dad's abuse. They started divulging a plan of running away. However, when Patricia found out that they were scheming to run away, she then manipulates them to let her come with them. So she tells them that she's also scared of Yasser, that she's done with him, she doesn't want anything to do with their father anymore, and that yes, they should all pack up their things and run away. So what does Patricia do? She tells her son Islam, because remember him, he's still around, but Islam is the golden child. Islam is Yasser's only son. So of course Islam is living life to the fullest and is well taken care of. So she tells her only son Islam not to worry. She's just going to the store with the girls. They're just gonna go grab some stuff. She was acting so normal prior to leaving. She was even making jokes, as Islam was recalling later on in interviews. He didn't see anything really weird with his mother's behavior, so he really did believe them when they said that they were just going to the store and coming right back. Around Christmas 2007, Patricia stated that Yasser threatened to kill Amina for dating an American boy. She took the girls to her aunt's house in Kansas, including Sarah's boyfriend Eric and their friend Eddie. And the reason why they brought Eddie on this trip is because in several different articles, they were stating that the girls ran away with their two boyfriends. And that is exactly what Amina wanted everyone to believe, because she was still protecting the identity of Joseph. She didn't want her father to figure out who he was or where he lived. So she used her friend Eddie as a cover-up. So in any articles that you read, that you see them claiming that she ran away with her boyfriend, it wasn't really her boyfriend. It was her friend, and it was Sarah's boyfriend, Eric, at the time. And their mother was with them. Now, the reason why Patricia wanted to finally take the girls and leave is because she really finally believed that Yasser would kill Amina. However, that night, while at the aunt's house in Kansas, they were having Mexican food, and all that they were missing were just some chips. So Patricia then volunteers to take all 4 kids to the grocery store to get some chips and return back for dinner. Now, while they were out, everything was fine, apparently. And then when they all returned back to the house for dinner, Patricia then started acting weird. She then started making excuses, saying that she needed to leave, that this wasn't the right place for her to be. And that's when she took all 4 kids and they left. They went and stayed in a hotel room in Tulsa, Oklahoma, all while looking for a house to rent. On December 28th, 2007, this is when they signed a lease under an alias for an apartment to rent. Soon after that, they moved right in. And on this same day is when Islam and Yasser were both blowing up their cell phones. Yasser called his aunt stating that he was upset. He missed his mother and his 2 sisters. He was inquiring about the whereabouts of where they were. He wanted to know if they were okay. He didn't understand why they didn't come home that day. He was under the impression that they were just going to the grocery store and they were coming right back. But when they never did, he grew worried. He let his father know that they never returned. And that's when him and his father started calling every single family member, looking for them. And they were leaving several different voicemails and they were sending several different emails. And I'm talking about that crazy, psycho, stalking, texting shit. I'm talking about the every 5 minutes calling and texting, leaving voicemail, emailing, like that crazy stalker type of behavior. However, after having that conversation with Islam, the aunt then gets on the phone with Yasser because he was sitting right there with Islam, so he just handed him the phone and he was reiterating the same sentiments. I'm sorry, I'll never do it again, oh, it's not true. You know, just playing up the victim role, which psychopaths and sociopaths are really good at. They can put on the charm when they need to. They can convince you that everything's all good and dandy, which is probably why Patricia was so easily brainwashed, because not only was Yasser double her age when they got married, he was able to manipulate and mold her to the T of what he wanted, of how she should respond, how she should act. She didn't have any skill sets for being able to decipher between manipulative behavior and healthy relationship habits, which you should check out that video, by the way. Either way, the aunt didn't buy his story. The aunt then hung up the phone with Yasser and called up Patricia and let her know what he was just saying to her. Now, on December 29th, 2007, Eddie, the friend of Amina's, he was a DJ at the time and he already had prior arrangements to do a few sets for a party or a show or something of the sort. And he had to go back to Texas. So the agreement was that they were going to go out for a few days and that they were going to come back for Eddie's set. Now, simultaneously at the same time, Patricia was sitting there and listening to all of these voicemails. She was reading all of the emails. And after doing so, Patricia then started to feel guilty. She felt guilty for abandoning her husband and felt guilty for abandoning her son. And she started to think about actually going back to Yasser. Now, remember the brother that Yasser is closest with, Yasin, who, by the way, is the same individual that Patricia was dating prior to Yasser? I mean, this is just like a messed up family arrangement. Well, he was also blowing up Patricia's phone. And when he finally got her on the phone with him, he led her to believe that she was going to be safe and protected, that he would tell Yasser to leave the home if that was the case, if that made her feel comfortable in returning, that they just wanted her to be home and safe and back with the family. According to Patricia, Sara is the one who spoke to Yasser first, and then she spoke to him on the phone, and then Amina spoke with her father. They reconciled everything and they all collectively decided to return home. However, Amina never actually knew that Sara and her mother were planning to ever return home. Patricia led her daughter to believe, Amina, that they were just going to go back home to Texas because it was her grandmother's birthday, or I should say her mother, but Amina's grandmother's birthday. And they were just going to go to her grave to put some flowers on her tombstone in honor of her memory, which was a 300-mile drive from where they were currently at. Suspicious, right? Really suspicious. So remember that Patricia was stating that they were just going to go do this whole grave thing, and then they were going to go back to Tulsa. And this is what she led Amina to believe. That's the only reason why the two girls got into the car with Patricia and even ventured back towards Texas in the first place. But right when they crossed the border to Texas, this is when Patricia decides to divulge to the two girls that they actually are going to go back home to Yasser, which left Amina in such a distraught state that she started to freak the hell out. She immediately started refusing to go home. She was saying that you guys can go, but she is not, which then led her to Eddie's house eventually. So she went over to Eddie's house. She stayed there a night or two. And Patricia and Sara went back home to Yasser's house. Now on December 31st, 2007, Amina calls her Aunt Connie, the same aunt that they were just previously staying with. And she then starts screaming and yelling at her, asking her if she knew that her mother was dumb enough to go back to Yasser. And everybody was so shocked because Patricia was adamantly saying that she would never go back to Yasser. She was done with him. She was done with his abuse. She finally had the last straw. She knew what Yasser was capable of, and she had heard him make threats to kill the two girls. So that's why she took the two girls originally and ran off with them. So everybody was so shocked to know that Patricia fell for Yasser's schemes and manipulative behavior and actually brought the two girls back to Texas. And that's when her aunt had told her to stay the hell away from Yasser, get as far away as possible, and to just get a restraining order. On January 1st, 2008, which is New Year's Day, Sara then begs Amina to come home to Yasser's house. So Sara and her mother, Patricia, then start calling Amina, and they are begging her to come home. They are telling her that enough is enough, just forget about everything and come back. And Amina was like, no, over my dead body. I would rather die first before ever returning back to that house. And that's just a freaky thing to think about, because, I mean, she would have rather died before actually going home. And you'll see why that's like such a really creepy statement later on when everything unfolds. So Amina was adamant that she wasn't going to go home. She knew in her heart and soul that her dad was going to kill her. So getting nowhere over the phone, Patricia then decides to get into her car. She goes over to Eddie's house and she tries to convince Amina in person to come home with her back to Yasser's house. And the entire time Amina is telling her no, she's not going. They have this full-on argument, eventually breaking Amina down, however, and she got into the car with Patricia and they headed back home to Yasser's place. When she got home, Yasser then states that he would like to take the two girls out for a nice dinner just to talk and smooth things over with them. So the two girls get into the taxi car that Yasser was currently driving, because that's what he would do for work. He was a taxi driver. And Yasser then takes the taxi and parks it in front of a hotel. He turns to Amina, who was sitting in the passenger seat. He pulls out a gun and shoots her twice in the chest. He then turns around and shoots Sara, who was sitting in the back seat, 9 times. After doing so, he fled the scene. He left the two girls in the car, bleeding out, dying. And miraculously, Sara was able to call 911. And on this 911 call, this is what happened.
Harvey, 911, what is your emergency? What's going on, ma'am?
I'm dying, that's what's up.
Okay, let me transfer you. I'm gonna get fire department online, okay? Hold on one sec, okay? What?
Oh my God.
Serving fire department.
Irving Fire Department.
Ma'am, are you still there? Ma'am, are you still there?
Yasser is still currently on the FBI's 10 most wanted list for a double homicide for capital murder. And he has connections in several different states. He has connections in New York, he has connections in Canada, he has connections in California, as well as Texas, and as well as back home in Egypt. So Yasser killed his 2 daughters in an honor killing. And what an honor killing is thought to be of is when you have a daughter and she shames the family. She's either considered a whore, or she's promiscuous, or sometimes she's just headstrong. This is when one of the men in the family will then kill the girl to relinquish the shame that is bestowed on the family because of her actions and deeds. But in all reality, honor killings, it's just another manipulative tool. It's a cowardice man who abused his 2 children, his 2 daughters, who already quote unquote tarnished them, who was too ashamed of his own actions of what he had done, refused to let these 2 girls become individuals of their own, have any thought process other than his own. And when he's seen it to be fit, he's the one who decided to pull the trigger, all to cover up his own actions, all to cover up the abuse that the torment that he put on these girls. And that's what a lot of honor killings are. They don't care if you were raped. They don't care if you were abused by your own father, or by an uncle, or by a cousin. All they see is that now you're no longer a virgin. We can't do anything with you, because women are looked at as possessions back home for some people. Not everybody, but there are some narrow-minded men that still think that this behavior is acceptable, that this is a religious, entitled act, when in fact it is not. It's not supported within the Quran whatsoever. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would have never condoned this behavior, and I find it cowardice and disgusting that these men hide behind the Quran in regards to justify their actions, their evil, malicious actions. How fucking dare you? And I hope that you guys all rot in hell. Every single person who condones this behavior, every single woman who supports their husband to condone this behavior, who encourages it, who covers up for them, is just as much of a piece of trash as the person doing it. We need to speak up for more victims. We need to protect our women. We need to understand that women are humans too. They are not lesser than a man. And I feel like that there was one narrow-minded man wanted to just achieve more power and control over the women in his life, and he's the one who started this whole thought process, and an entire culture developed out of it. An entire culture's mentality developed out of this. So going back to Egypt, there are still people being killed. There are still women and children being killed because of this thought process of honor killing. If you dishonor the family, we have the right to kill you because we brought you into this world. No, you didn't bring them into this world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought them into this world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saw that it was fit for them to be in this world, not you. You did one act, and that was sleeping with your husband or wife, whoever's doing it, doesn't matter, talking to both of you guys. And that is what you did. You didn't create life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created life, not you. So it's a narcissistic mentality. It's disgusting, manipulative behavior, and it teaches women that they aren't as special as a man, that they're not as respectable or worthy as a man, and that needs to change. This is the kind of behavior that causes women to believe that they have to obey everything that their husband does or says to do, when in fact women have their own mind, their own freedom of thought for a reason, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saw it to be fit. If Allah did not want us to have freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of thinking, then we would have been created submissive. But we're not. We have just as equal of a right, sometimes even smarter than men. And I think that's what scares most of these men who have this mentality, is that they don't want their women to be strong. They don't want their women to be smart. They want them confined in their home, popping out babies and obeying to everything that they say and do. And by the way, just because you're married doesn't mean that they are required to sleep with you. There is such thing as rape even within a marriage. Just because you're married does not mean you're entitled to anything. The wife still has her own rights. She has her own feelings, and men need to start appreciating and respecting that. And I will be the first one to advocate for this because I am so sick and tired of it. It's a very ignorant and primitive thought process to have. And in the year of 2020, where anything is possible, I think we as a whole society need to move forward. We need to start acknowledging the problems that we have within our own culture. That way we can improve. We can get better. We can't stay in denial and continue to do the same toxic and ignorant shit over and over again, expecting that we're gonna have a different outcome. Wondering why our women are the way that they are. Wondering why our men are the way that they are. When we could be so much better. Till this day, nobody knows where Yasser is. A lot of people think that his own family, the Saids, they're hiding him. Again, he stated it himself that he has a lot of connections, both underground and with people in high places. So it's not a crazy thought to believe. The last two people that the phone records show that Yasser ever spoke to were his brother Yassine and his brother Mohsen. And somebody had to pick him up from the crime scene, because if you just shot two teenage girls inside of a taxi cab, you're going to be covered with blood. And if you're parked in front of a hotel, how the hell are you going to get away from that crime scene? Somebody had to come pick you up. So it was one of those two brothers. The Irvine Police Department never actually conducted a full investigation. They never interviewed either of the Said brothers. Patricia herself is a pathological liar. If you check out this documentary that I have linked in the description box below, you will see how much she flip-flops from one interview to the next. So one interview she'll state that she is a Christian. Another interview she'll state that she's a Muslim. One interview she'll give you one perspective saying that she's never known about it. Another interview she's playing the victim, stating that yes, it happened, but she was being abused too. And it was just a shit show. You can't tell whether or not Patricia was lying, I don't even think Patricia knows what really happened at this point, because she has believed her own lies to the extent of that she mixed up the story completely and jumbled it up into her own head. Now Islam, the brother, he took on the same kind of toxic mentality that his father had. His father taught it to him starting at a very young age, and he really truly believes that his father had to go kill his sisters. He lays all the blame on Joseph Moreno, the quote-unquote boyfriend of Amina, and totally relinquishes his father from any of the blame. So he's stating that it was his fault, even though the majority of Amina and Joseph's relationships were really text messaging, emailing, and note passing. These two kids barely held hands, barely hugged, but it was their fault. It was their fault for their own death and their own demise, not the father, not the one that actually pulled the trigger. So Islam is a lost case at this point, in my opinion. Till this day, they haven't gotten justice, and Yasser is still out there living his life. So recognize and memorize his face. If you see this man, call the FBI's phone number so we can catch this son of a bitch, because he doesn't deserve his freedom. He really doesn't. I gotta remember my own saying, you guys. I am so sorry for that. I lost my temper there for a good second. I just think it's ridiculous that this man gets to live and these two girls are dead, and they were only 17 and 18 years old, and their whole life was just a shit show with two piece of shit parents who didn't look out for their own daughters, didn't protect them, didn't take care of them. Anyways, stay kind, spread love, spread knowledge, and I will see you guys all next time.